We will be getting started in just a few minutes. We're just going to make sure that our live stream is set up, and then we will get started. Thank you for joining us tonight. We'll start in just a few minutes. We're just waiting for our live stream to begin. Thank you for your patience. We'll be starting soon, and thank you for joining us this evening. All right, so we are going to go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Go ahead and share my screen. Hello, and thank you for joining us this evening for our community information session for Campbell Union High School District. My name is Sarah Foy. I'm the coordinator of community engagement and communications for the school district. And we have several members of the district leadership team with us this evening, including Superintendent Robert Bravo, Board President Kaylin Gallagher, and we have Chief of Human Capital and Strategy Meredith Hudson, Assistant Superintendent of Ed Services Herman Serta. We have Assistant Superintendent of Business Services, April Duzon. And additionally, we have with us this evening, Director of Student Services, Crystal Adams. Thank you guys all for joining us this evening.
Hey, I'm only Herman and I waved when you said our names.
Not sure.
Okay.
Okay, great. So we have just a few items to go over regarding the webinar etiquette. Submit your questions through the Q&A button in our Zoom webinar. If you're joining us through the Facebook comments tonight, the link to the Zoom webinar was sent via email and is listed in the Facebook comments. If you guys were not able to join the webinar, we are still live streaming it on Facebook, so that is fine. Just make sure that we will have limited Facebook comments for this evening. So we do encourage everyone to join the Zoom webinar if you would like to submit a question to the panelists tonight. Due to the time constraints, we may not be able to address every question today, but they will be used to inform the frequently asked questions that we post on the CUHSD website. If you are on the Zoom webinar this evening as a participant, your line will be muted and the chat and hand raise features on Zoom are disabled. Again, this webinar is being live streamed on Facebook and recorded for anyone who was not able to attend live this evening. They'll be able to see all of the information shared tonight after the fact. We will post it on our Facebook page and also have a recording on our YouTube channel and on our website. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Superintendent Robert Bravo, who has a few slides to share with us this evening.
Thanks, Sarah. Let's go ahead and just jump to the first one. So tonight I'm going to talk a little bit about where are we along the process of trying to move back towards having more in-person services. So for those of you who have been following this issue closely, like I know many of you have, the last time the board had a discussion on this topic was in January. And at that time, it was my recommendation and the board concurred that we weren't ready to further open the schools at that time. So we have been and we are in what we call level 1, which is distance learning and some very limited in-person support. And I'm going to talk more about each one of these in a few moments. And I'm also going to share with you what I'm likely going to propose to the board on March 4th. So that is the next time that the board is due to take up this question. And so I thought, in all fairness, I needed to telegraph my likely proposal to them with a little bit of time for the community to adequately be able to digest it and respond. So let's go to the next slide. So when I talk about my recommendation or my likely recommendation, I had to put a disclaimer out there that all plans are subject to change. And we have seen that over the last year because of COVID. Things going up, things going down, surge, things get better, that kind of a thing. So what is the likely recommendation tonight? I think chances are it's going to stay the same, but we have to always be ready to adapt. Secondly, each school site is going to develop its own customized plans that might be slightly different from what I'm talking about tonight, because every site is different. And every site is going to have different groups of teachers who are able to report in person. Every site is going to have different students, different families that are interested or not interested in trying to take advantage of any in-person services. So it's going to look different from school to school. And so let's get into the brief overview of the plan for phased return to in-person services. So in level 1, where we are right now and have been, it's distance learning is how all instruction is being given, and there's very limited in-person support. So when I say limited in-person support, what I'm talking about is we have opened some places on our campuses that really are like study halls. We call them connectivity hubs or learning labs. They're places where students can go who maybe they don't have good connectivity at home, even with the provided hotspot that we've given them. Maybe there's just lots of distraction in the home. There could be different reasons why, but they report there, they're doing the same online learning that everybody else is doing, but they're doing it on campus. We're also having some opportunities for credit recovery after school, and we plan on having some during the scheduled breaks. Credit recovery is necessary now more than ever because unfortunately we have more failure in courses right now. In terms of activities and athletics at level 1, there have been activities. We've had some dedicated coaches and students who really love their sport that have been practicing and conditioning, but competition really hasn't been taking place yet. let's go to the next slide. So level 2, we expand in-person support activities. And right now, it's my intention to recommend to the board next Thursday at their meeting that we move to level 2 so that on Wednesday, March 24th, some students will be able to go to in-person tutorials on Wednesdays. Now, we are only going to have so much capacity, and we want to keep students in stable cohorts or stable groups. We don't want lots of mixing happening. So we want to limit how much contact is going on. So the ability to participate in these tutorials is going to be by invitation. And I know that's probably disappointing for many of us, that any student who wants wouldn't be able to attend. But we're specifically targeting those students who are failing classes and not doing well, so that they can get the support they need so that they don't fall into a trap that leads them towards not graduating. So in order to do these in-person opportunities, we would be asking staff to come back and work on site. We should also note that not everyone will be able to come back. We do have a sizable number of our teaching staff, for example, who qualify for accommodations in their work assignment. It could be that they are immunocompromised or live with someone else who's immunocompromised. So let's not get too excited, kind of keep the expectations sort of in the right place, that these are going to, that even though I'm recommending an expansion, it's really a very modest expansion. It's by invitation, and it's specifically targeted to students who are not passing their classes. Now, I hope that there will be extended opportunities for some in-person activities. And we know that the state of California and our county, they are approving competition in youth sport as of Friday. So there will be some greater athletic opportunities for students. Let's go to the next slide. So in our plan, going to level 3 means now we're actually having some classes on campus happening in person again. Distance learning will still be the mode for most students. Unfortunately, I just don't see that we're going to have the personnel and the staff available to make it to level 4, which is anyone who wants to have some kind of on-campus class can have one. I don't think we're going to get there. But I do think that we can get to a very limited number of classes on campus, again, aimed at those students who are falling off the graduation track for the most part. So that these students not only would have in-person tutorial opportunities, but they would get to take some of their classes on the Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. I think that we can do this at the last week of March, just shortly after starting level 2. I think we can move to level 3 as long as our county is in the red tier. And it's very likely that we are going to move from the purple tier to the red tier next week. Next slide. So we have completed a number of preparations that I think will allow for this modest increase of services. The school sites have COVID-19 prevention plans, which they poured over. Administrators have been trained on COVID-19 procedures, like, what do I do when someone who has COVID has been on campus. Site administrators are building customized school plans about who will be able to have the option of doing some in-person tutorials or classes. We are set to go with COVID-19 employee testing at our school sites. And we have been hiring additional substitutes and support staff to try and make this happen. And parents, again, please note, because we could have a scenario where someone is exposed to COVID, not necessarily at school, but just away from school, which is much more likely, that they have to quarantine. And so then we would need substitutes. So we expect that the demand for substitutes will be increased, and that's why we are hiring additional substitutes. Next slide. And just to give everyone an update on vaccine, because this has been something that we get asked lots of questions about. What's going on with vaccination, and are teachers going to have any kind of preference when it comes to getting vaccination? And I'm very excited that beginning February 28th, teachers are eligible in this county for vaccinations. Now, that being said, it's going to take some time, and we don't anticipate that many of our staff are going to, and should not expect that many of our staff are going to be vaccinated as of March 1. It's going to take time. People are going to have to get appointments. Then there's the time for in between, and then the second shot, et cetera. But this is a really positive thing that's taking place. Next slide. This is more on the athletics, as I know many people are interested in this. So the sports that are allowed in the widespread tier, or the purple tier that we're in right now, cross country, golf, skiing, snowboarding, we don't have to do that, but swimming, diving, tennis, and track and field. And as you can tell, those are all outdoor sports, and those are sports where there's not close contact between students. So those we can do. In the red tier, sports allowed are baseball, field hockey, lacrosse, and softball. The sports of badminton, football, gymnastics, soccer, water polo, those say moderate, or when we're in the orange tier. But there's the asterisk that the outdoor, high contact, orange tier sports can be played in the purple and red tier, or red tier, with an adjusted case rate of equal to or less than 14 cases per 100,000 people under conditions. The conditions are, there's informed consent on the part of the parents that their students can play, that face coverings are used, that there's physical distancing to the extent possible, that there is frequent testing of the athletes, and that we maintain the hygiene and sanitation requirements that the health department wants us to. We limit mixing by participants as much as possible, and we refrain from having contests that require students to travel long distances. Next paragraph, next paragraph, next slide, next steps. Okay, so March 4th, the board will consider if they believe that it is time to transition to level 2 and or level 3. Again, that seems that it will be my likely recommendation that I will recommend that we have level 2 services starting March 24th and level 3 services as early as March 29th. There will be meetings with site administrators to approve their customized plans. Staff will be invited to attend staff site-specific information sessions about what procedures This will be in place of the site, what courses are going to be offered, etc. We will continue to work with our labor partners to conduct any negotiations that are necessary. And then we will continue to communicate to parents, guardians, and families about what's going on. Next slide. So I mentioned our interest in hiring more people so that we do have substitutes as needed. We're looking for tutors to work on campus with some of the students to get them back on the graduation track. And so I'm going to give a plug to some virtual hiring information sessions that are coming up soon. February 25th and March 2nd from 5:30 to 6:30 p.m. Our staff will provide information on how to apply for available positions and how to begin the process to become a substitute or even a full-time teacher. Next slide. Time for questions. Okay. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you for that, Dr. Bravo. So again, recap of how to submit a question. We already have several that have been submitted through the Q&A button on the Zoom webinar. Again, if you are joining us through the Facebook Live, we do encourage you to join the Zoom webinar to be able to submit questions. We will be using the questions from the Zoom webinar to kind of streamline the amount of questions that we are able to receive. So one of the first questions that came through, I'm going to ask Dr. Bravo. You did reference around level 4, us not being able to provide that this academic year. Can you expand on if that you meant that to be also for next fall, or really that was really meant for this semester in particular?
Meant for this semester. I think that we should expect that we will have level 4 after June.
And one more question for you is around, you did mention that soon teachers will be eligible to receive vaccines in Santa Clara County. Can you kind of speak to what that means as far as our planning or being able to accommodate more students on campus?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, being eligible to get the vaccine is not necessarily going to mean that they're going to be able to get both doses in a rapid manner. So I'm still going to recommend some partial reopening before vaccination is completed, but it doesn't really change, I think, how far we can make more services available on site than we're talking about right now.
And one of the questions that came through, Dr. Bravo, is regarding negotiations with our largest labor partner, Campbell High School Teachers Association. Can you speak to what the latest is with negotiations with our teachers union and how that may impact future planning?
Well, I recently sent a notice that the Campbell High School Teachers Association feels that we need the assistance of a mediator appointed by the state in order to continue forward in negotiations. I don't think that's necessarily true that we need that, but it really, that's what we're looking at right now is that remain to be Chista's position, or do we feel like we can keep negotiations going at the local level? But either way, my recommendation to the board is going to be the same.
And one of the questions that came through the Zoom webinar Q&A button is regarding seniors and our seniors this year, and if our school sites are planning any sort of in-person activities to celebrate or honor our seniors this academic year. Do you have anything to speak to how our school sites are planning towards end of the year celebrations?
Just about an hour ago, I was actually talking with my student advisory council, and this is something that is very important to them. And if things go well this spring with vaccination and case rates stay low, I am hopeful that we will have some kind of graduation ceremonies in person.
That's great news. I know that is very important to our families who have seniors this year. A question that came through is regarding the parent choice. So we know we will be offering more in-person support and even some instruction possibly if the board decides to move forward with your recommendation next week. Will families still have the opportunity to request that their child remain in full distance learning and not participate in the in-person support being offered?
Yes, yes. There's not going to be a situation where a family has to accept an invitation to an in-person class.
And also, I know that, for level 3 to talk around how the school sites are identifying the students who might be eligible to participate in the in-person instruction. Can you speak to some of the groups that may be prioritized, such as students with special needs or foster students or things like that? Are those the kinds of students who are being targeted, or what is kind of the criteria that principals are using to dictate their plans?
Well, I think first and foremost is that we're looking again for students who are not being successful academically in their courses. So they're failing 2, 3, maybe even more of their classes, and that's the starting place. There is a focus especially on freshmen, because the research tells us that when freshmen fail multiple courses, the likelihood of graduation really plummets very quickly. And so we want to make sure that we don't have students who start their high school career in a hole that they feel like they have to dig their way out of. At the same time, we want to make sure that our other students stay on track as well. So I know that current seniors and getting them graduated is going to be important too. So that's really going to be what the focus is going to be keeping students on the graduation track.
And we did receive a question around, a lot of we are hearing about school districts opening in the state of California or even in the Bay Area. Can you speak to, how many high schools in comparison that you're hearing about reopening, or kind of what the guidance has been at the state and even the federal level regarding high schools, and why that has made it a little bit more difficult for us to be able to open as quickly as our peers in the unified districts that have much younger children?
Sure. So I think it's true that both our Governor Newsom, and the President Biden, have both focused their comments on elementary school grades and elementary grades and getting those students back as rapidly as possible. I think that they put their focus there for several reasons. And one of them being that I think that there is a general sense that younger students that distance learning is just even harder for a younger student. That doing distance learning when you can't even read yet potentially is a non-starter. So I think some of it is the fact just that they want to prioritize the younger students. There has been some research that adolescents can be more likely than younger students to have COVID. I think that's probably created a pause for some planning. However, the new CDC guidance that came out on February 12th does apply to all grades K-12. And the CDC is saying that high school grade instruction can take place in person with the right mitigation strategies in place. So I think the fact that there is a lot of focus at the state level and the national level aimed towards elementary doesn't really, I suppose, help our cause, but I don't think it hurts it. And ultimately, I want those elementary schools back in session, because for many of our students, one of the struggles they have going on right now is that they're studying from home with little brothers and sisters and they've been tasked with watching over them. And so we've had students tell us, I would love to come to campus, but I can't. As long as my little brothers and sisters can't go to their school, I won't be able to come to ours. Sarah, did I answer all parts of that question? I feel like I missed something.
So. I think so. I think you got most of it, that, it is a lot easier to be able to open elementary schools. They're able to have a lot more stable cohorts and those things. And so while we are hearing about reopening in the state of California area, it is more true that it's elementary.
That's the part I missed, though, because I think you were asking about other high schools opening or not opening. And from what we know, just in our county, I know that Palo Alto, for example, is working towards having some high school instruction, but other districts like East Side has already determined that they will remain distance learning completely through the rest of this academic year. And then you have districts like San Jose Unified, where they have come to agreements in which they will start doing some in-person learning, but only when we get to the orange tier. Even though you can do some in-person learning at the red tier, they've decided to wait to orange. So it really is, that's our county, that's the local context. So what we know is that in the Bay Area, most high school students are still doing distance learning. It's uneven, with some starting to do more in-person things and some not. Northern California, where it's less populous, there's a lot of schools that are moving towards more in-person learning, but it's definitely a mix.
Great, I think that answers all parts of that question. One question that came through as well is around bell schedules, and with any of the transitions to level 2 or level 3, how will that impact bell schedules currently?
We don't anticipate it really impacting schedules, that we feel that we can do it in the extant schedules that we have right now. And I think that for many students, it will seem pretty seamless.
And a lot of our plan, as we had mentioned, is for high schools, for our high schools. But we do have Camden Post-Secondary and CASE as well, that I can see that we have some parents on the webinar asking questions around Camden Post-Secondary. Can you speak to what your recommendation might entail for those students?
Yeah, that's something that I'm still in the process of working with our director of special education around. So I don't have one tonight.
And a question around in-person activities and what we mean by in-person activities, for example, clubs, and how we will be able to mitigate any spread of COVID during those in-person activities.
Yeah, and that's why I don't want people to get too much hope that we're going to have lots of in-person activities going on, but it is possible that there could be some club activities potentially. And those would be activities that I would imagine would be activities where we can be out, if they can be outside, if we can do social distancing, etc.
And we do have a lot of questions around level 4. So I know if people are just popping on into the webinar or through the Facebook Live around your rationale, or why at this time, even though vaccines may be eligible for, or are eligible for educators in the near future, why we are still anticipating not being able to reach level 4 this academic year.
Well, it's a combination of factors. And one of the things that when we did surveys of parents earlier this academic year about interest of returning to campus for classes, there was high interest that fell off very rapidly when the possibility of having schedule changes was introduced. So when we ask the question, well, do you still want to come back if your student ends up with a different set of teachers? That interest really fell off. And every community is different. You know, there are some communities where there is a greater percentage of the parents that are saying, yes, I want my student to be back on campus, and you know, I am willing to have a different set of teachers, and others that are very much invested in the teachers that they have now. That's one reason. And again, going back to the question about why don't we hear very much about high schools at the state or the national level, I think it's because that's just another piece of complexity in the high school picture. And I think you mentioned it, Sarah, when you talked about how difficult it is to put students in stable groups or cohorts at the secondary level when our teachers really are subject matter experts, not like in the primary grades. So I think, you know, that's a limiting factor about how many students I think we'll be able to have on our campus. Again, as I mentioned, we also are going to have a good number of staff, I would say at least 25%, that would qualify for accommodations, works accommodations, so that they would remain at home. An example, you know, let's say we have a teacher who has lives in a home with an immunocompromised 8-year-old, for example. You can't vaccinate an 8-year-old, right? So even though the teacher might be eligible for a vaccine, they would still qualify for remaining distance learning because they're in that household with someone who can't get the vaccine yet. So again, we already know that about 25% of our staff qualify for these accommodations. And there are a number of applications for accommodations still pending. That's just another complicating factor.
I'm going to give you a little bit of a break and have a question now for Board President Kaylin Gallagher. So we know that the board is expected to make a decision on Superintendent Bravo's recommendation next week. Can you kind of speak to what factors kind of are the board going to consider when making that decision?
Yeah, definitely. And hi, everyone. Thanks for joining tonight. Yeah, I think starting off with just recognizing that, you know, we have 5 trustees who are elected who come from radically different walks of life, right? We have people that span different generations, people who come from different political parties or independents. People have their own health issues, loved ones they live with that have different conditions. So I think just bringing that life experience in, and I think it's, you know, as a board, I think sometimes we radically disagree on some things, right? But I think coming from a place of respect and we're able to continue to work together has always been important. And on top of that, we actually have 2 student board members that we have entrusted with going out and learning more about what students really care about. And I think they bring a really valuable voice into discussions as well. They're amazing, quite frankly, and how well they do. But so I think everyone kind of brings their own decision-making criteria into a decision and a vote. At the same time, I think there are some things that string across for everyone. You know, at the very beginning, I think, in continuing to be safety at the forefront of what can we do safely, what is possible and what isn't. I think also just having a really deep understanding of what is happening in our system currently. How are students reacting, not only from an academic standpoint, but from a mental health standpoint. And I think that carries over to staff as well, and how you know, we can set up plans that react to that. And then I think third is just really being based in science, right? I think we live in this weird era, and we've seen it across the last year or last, you know, maybe decade in our political system, where people bring their own sets of facts into their arguments and their viewpoints that aren't always necessarily have the most round view of things. And so I think really just leaning into what experts are telling us from the federal level, from the state level, from the county level. Sometimes those things go against what our gut would tell us, but just trying to like have a deep understanding of what those recommendations are. And then I think really the last thing is I think our board, each board member just has really high expectations of our system, right? We know that we cannot go back in person until we're out of the purple tier. That is set by the state. There are certain rules that are set by the county, but whatever rule is passed down to us, we want to make sure we're doing the best that we can. So it comes to the fact that we have warehouses full of PPE, right? Our staff was able to get that really early on. We had really high expectations of getting technology into students' hands, into having plans about how we reopen. So if the board does decide to move forward in phase 2 or phase 3, lots of those plans were written 6 months ago, right? And so it's dusting some of it off and refreshing for, what we know now, but we don't have to reinvent the wheel from that day forward. So I know that's a little long-winded, but I think at the core, those are some of the things that we're thinking about. And kind of the beauty of our system is due to the California Brown Act, I can't talk to board members outside of our board meetings. So anytime we have discussions about this, it's open to the public. So I encourage you to check out our meetings. We live stream everything and continue to be involved. We've received thousands of emails, like literally thousands of emails. I know board members usually print them out and read them and try to give you the response that we can in the time. So if you have thoughts, please send them our way.
Thank you for that, Trustee Gallagher. And I was going to ask you one more question from a board member's perspective, because we have received a lot of questions around already planning for fall, which we're also is on our mind as well, and kind of how the board has been approaching planning long-term and also short-term decisions, because with COVID, things are rapidly changing, and same with the guidances from our state and county. So can you kind of talk around how the board has been approaching these kind of decisions throughout the process and what we might be able to expect as we look towards fall?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, like you said, we have to recognize that things feel radically different week to week sometimes within this, right? And so how does the system respond to that type of reality that we live in? To me, I think it comes down to really plans that are flexible, that have thought out what things might look like. I think Dr. Bravo can talk a little bit about how we're talking about level 4 today, right? Level 4 is flexible enough that can get us all the way back to fully in person at some point. Part of it depends on how many students are opting in. So I think just making sure that we have plans that are flexible, that we can build upon. And that, I think at the very beginning, we said, Dr. Bravo, anytime you need us, if you need us to pass additional contracts for PPE or, whatever it is, we're on call. Let us know. We'll have the meeting, make decisions and move forward.
Sarah, if I could add on a little bit, for those folks that are concerned about the fall, first, I just want to say, I appreciate that you're looking towards the fall. And I've been very concerned myself, thinking about how things looked in January. I started feeling like, wow, we're not just talking about, the continuation of distance learning through more of this academic year. People are already starting to talk about it for the next academic year. So I appreciate that people recognize that. I do think that we will have level 4 in the fall. And I think one of the reasons why we'll be in a better position for that in the fall, well, vaccination is one for sure, but also I think that we will, that for those families that know that they want a continuation of distance learning, that we really sort of scheduled those folks together, almost like their own school, right? And then for the rest of those folks who are saying, no, I am interested in some in-person learning, that they know that to the extent we can do it, that that they're going to participate in that. So we won't have to worry about changes to master schedules.
So we have received a lot of questions around athletics, which is to be anticipated because there are a lot of updates and those things are rapidly changing. Can you speak to, with the county and the state latest guidance on athletics, and kind of does the district decide, to go with that guidance, or do we have any sort of wiggle room with that? And I know that there is questions around testing and how often that will be needed if we do resume some sports. Can you just speak to what the district does when we receive the guidance from athletics and how we kind of implement that, and also around the question of testing?
Well, when we get guidance around athletics from the state and the county, we can do more than the state and county ask us to do in terms of mitigation efforts to keep to try and prevent the transmission of COVID. But we can't do less. There's no wiggle room there. You can't do less than the minimum requirements that they set out for us. So we're always going to comply with those minimum requirements. So ask me the rest of the question again, Sarah.
So yes, the question around the guidance, and then the second one around, we heard that that students will need to be tested more frequently if we do bring some more sports back based on the latest guidance from the state. Can you speak to kind of what that process might look like and how often students might need to be tested?
Well, I'm going to call on Crystal Adams, our Director of Student Services, to help me out with this one, because she's one page ahead in the book on this one.
Yeah, the book that's being published the minute we're here. So with the testing would be required for the high contact outdoor sports that were slated to be orange tier sports. So for season 1, that would include football and water polo. The testing is only required when the adjusted case rate in the county is between 7 and 14. Right now, the published case rate for our county is 10.9, so it would be required. There's a chance that that may be changing and adjusting as of tomorrow when they publish those numbers and putting us below 7. So that would mean it wouldn't be required. However, we are still, the athletic directors and principals are going to be working on plans for testing the football and water polo athletes within the guidelines of getting the results in time for any contests, and working on getting those kits ordered and to the sites in the event that the testing would be necessary as well. So we are in the planning phase of getting that ready to go for the sites.
Thank you, Crystal, for chiming in there. And we speak a lot about athletics, but activities as well as like theater or band. I don't know if this would be a question for Crystal or for Superintendent Bravo, but can you speak to what those activities may look like in the future?
That's a great question. Today in the meeting of the county superintendents, that question was asked, and our county health department, they haven't changed their guidance yet on what they call aerosol producing activities, like blowing trumpets and things like that. But they are aware of the interest that's on the part of many of our teachers and students, and I think we'll probably get some new guidance around that pretty soon.
Great. We love our theater students, so and our band students, so we'll be anxious to hear when we can do some more in-person activities for them. So one of the questions that came through is around level 3, and if a student is identified to participate in in-person instruction, can you speak to what that might look like for that student who might be participating? Will they be in a sort of hybrid scenario, or will they be in class every day? Can you just speak to, I know it varies depending on site and what their plans are, but at a very brief high level, what that might look like for a student who is participating in level 3 in-person instruction services?
Yeah. Well, that's a great question. And again, I don't anticipate that they would have a full schedule of in-person classes, because again, we have a number of our staff who won't be able to be on campus. So, there's 2 different ways it could look. One way is that the student has an in-person class for one period, but then maybe spends the next period basically in a study hall doing remote learning for a class. In some cases, potentially, it might be that we have a student who comes on campus for a class and then actually travels home for the other classes. So it could be either a hybrid type scenario or a longer amount of time on campus, but having to spend some of that more in a study hall type setting.
And if a student is not identified as part of a priority group, can you just recap a little bit of what kind of in-person support that student might be able to participate in if they are not identified to be a part of live in-person instruction?
Well, if you're a parent and you feel like your student is they might be passing right now, but you think that they could need some support, I would encourage you to talk with your site administration about that situation.
And there are questions around teacher vaccines. We received several questions around vaccinating teachers. And the question really is, do we know, how are we able to track how many of our teachers are going to be vaccinated? And kind of what is the district doing to ensure that our teachers have access to vaccines?
Yeah, great questions. Today with the other superintendents of the county, along with the County Office of Education and the County Department of Public Health, there is some discussions about what we can do to support teacher vaccination even further. So right now, teachers can sign up for vaccination, but they would be signing up from the same providers that lots of other folks would be, whether it's Kaiser or Stanford Health, or they could sign up for an appointment to go to like the Levi Stadium Center. What the county is working on, though, is working on creating some vaccination opportunities that would be exclusively for educators. And so we should be hearing more about that in the next couple of days.
And also a question about summer school and what that might look like this year.
Well, I know that we have plans to have a greatly expanded summer school, because we do believe that we are going to have a number of students that need to make up some credits because they weren't able to pass some classes this year. And I'm going to ask Herman Cerda, the Assistant Superintendent for Ed Services, to maybe he can paint a more complete picture of what we're planning for summer school.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Bravo. Yes, we're making plans to offer summer school at every comprehensive site. We've actually increased the stipend for our teachers, and so we're getting a lot of interest. We actually have over 40 applicants currently that are interested in teaching summer, and we're still looking at the staff that has applied, the teachers that have applied, but we're looking at pretty much every content. We're looking at the need. The schools actually submitted their need and how many students each of the sites will be able to service. The other thing is every school site will have a summer school principal. So the majority of our assistant principals have actually applied and were hired as assistant principals. So they will be facilitating, assisting with that process. And we are going to be offering in person as well as distance learning. And so we're very excited about that. The other course that we are going to offer Odyssey Wear credit recovery as well, which is something that we offer every year. Last year we offered it, and we had over 600 students that actually fulfilled a course that they either needed for graduation or they needed to fulfill an A to G graduate UC CSU requirement. So we're pretty excited about that. And the other thing I forgot to mention, also ESY for some of our kids with IEPs, we will be offering it at one site. And so those students will be transported if they require it. And we will be offering transportation at every comprehensive site for students that do need it, which is something that we started offering a couple of years ago. And I know we were transporting approximately 200 students, and we're hoping to transport more during this summer. So we're pumping a lot of resources, a lot of support. We're looking into offering mental health support through CASI. We're offering, actually, we're hiring additional tutors. We're hiring bilingual aides to provide support for our students. And so we're trying to pump as many resources as possible so that we can get, usually we have about 600 plus students that recover 2 courses. We're hoping to double that, if not more than double that. So that's the goal for this summer. I think I covered everything.
Thank you, Mr. Serta. That was a pretty
Thank you.
robust answer, I think. So we did receive quite a few questions around mental health. So we know that, you know, in our plan, we discussed in-person academic support, but we know that mental health is another thing that we want to address. Superintendent Bravo, can you speak to what kind of in-person mental health services might be available in any future plans?
I'm going to ask Herman to come back in on that one.
Yes, yeah, that one's mine. Actually, the sites are already bringing in. Each of the sites has either, some sites have 2.5 CASI counselors that are assigned to each other's sites, and they've actually they're having their CASI counselors provide in-person CASI support as well as online counseling support. So that's going to be continuing, and we're hoping to expand it to where CASI counselors will be on sites on a more frequent basis to ensure that we're providing the support for our students in person as well as via distance as well.
Thank you. And this one might also be for Mr. Serta, but we did receive a lot of questions around SVCTE. And if you know any plans for in-person for SVCTE, our partner district, or if you don't know the answer, where they might be able to get more information around their plans.
I don't have an update on their plans, but in my conversation with Katie Bennett, the coordinator, it's my understanding that teachers are back teaching from their classroom, but they don't have their students there yet. So my understanding is that they're working on possibly bringing some of their students back. And so, but that is just in my conversation with Katie Bennett, and they have their own superintendent, of course, and so they're working on it as well, it's my understanding.
Thank you. And I know there are still quite a few questions that we haven't been able to get to. And again, we will use them to inform a frequently asked questions that we'll post on our website and distribute through our normal communication channels. So I just want to wrap up some of the most questions that we've received, even if we already went over them, just in case people are kind of popping in towards the end. So Superintendent Bravo, can you just recap exactly what you will be proposing to the board at next week's board meeting? And then I'll ask Kaylin Gallagher kind of what the next steps are for the board.
So right now, I plan to recommend to the trustees that we go to our level 2 services starting Wednesday, March 24th. And that we go to our level 3 services as soon as March 29th, as long as we've been in the red tier 5 days or better.
And Trustee Gallagher, can you kind of speak to the decisions that the board will be considering during the March 4th board meeting next week?
Yeah, so it's really going to come down to a board discussion about Superintendent Bravo's recommendation. And then we'll end up taking a vote, and there's 5 of us and the majority goes, right? So I think that will be a time for the board to clarify any questions that we have and have some discussion about the best path forward. 2 thoughts. One, like I said before, we have received thousands of pieces of mail or email about this, but we want to hear more. And I mean that very sincerely. We really do rely on you to let us know what you think about the path forward. And so when you receive that many emails, it's hard to do individualized responses, but I will, as board president, make sure that all our board members receive it and just acknowledge that we've received it. The second thing there is, I keep telling people, if you're only emailing your school board and not emailing your city, your county, your state officials, even your federal officials, you're not being the strongest advocate that you could be. As a school district, we have to operate within a lot of different rules and plans that are set down upon us, and we don't really have a choice. So if you do really want to make sure that your viewpoint is heard at all the decision-making levels, like please do contact at least your county and state officials to let them know how you feel about the path forward.
Thank you, Trustee Gallagher. And I know we did have a lot of questions around athletics, and we are continuing to get new information around that. So please expect to get more information around athletics from your school's athletics director. They will be able to provide more information on next steps as far as what sports might be available to do more in person. I think that is pretty much the time that we have for this evening. We're right up on 7 o'clock. We want to stick to keeping our time and making sure that everybody gets out on time. And again, I know there's a lot of questions we didn't get to, but that we will make sure that we read all of them, and we will try to put as many as we can on our website moving forward so that you guys have answers when we are able to provide them. We want to thank all of our parents, the nearly 300 that were able to join us this evening. We really appreciate any parent and guardians taking time out of their busy schedules to come on and provide input, ask questions, those important questions. They really help us to make sure that we're communicating what you guys want to know and need to know right now as things continue to evolve and change. I wanted to just give Superintendent Bravo or Board President Gallagher to be able to sum up or have any ending remarks before we head out for this evening.
Well, I just want to say that I want to echo President Gallagher's comments that, I have to admit, I get emails and sometimes I don't give very long replies back, but I do read them. I do read every one. So, thank you for the messages. And I know some folks agree with my recommendations and some people disagree, and that's okay. Ultimately, we're in a democracy, and as President Gallagher said, the trustees listen to all the input they get. And I think we're fortunate that we have some great trustees, very conscientious people who really study up on the issues and really do the best they can to vote in a way that's going to help kids.
Yeah, and I just add, be kind to one another. I think these are tough decisions. They're once in a century decisions. I can handle an email that is mean to me. But it hurts to see family members or parents attacking each other, staff, teachers. I think everyone can come to different decisions and be rational people. And I hope that our community can model what civic disagreements look like. And thank you for being a part of it. It's a messy process, but it's the process that we have. So thank you.
Thank you. And we echo that. You have our Facebook page up for people to voice their opinions and things like that. But yes, please make sure that it is a place of respect and that we are being courteous to our fellow community members. We're all in this together. So have a great evening, everybody. And thank you for joining us. And we'll be in communication very soon. Thank you. Bye.
Night.
Thank you.